Firstly, when it comes to strength maintenance versus performance and whether we're still trying to grow and get stronger, what's the mindset? I think largely we want to be still making some progress with majority of our squad over the year, and the mindset will shift from department to department, but more often than not in a high performance program, whether the field sport be rugby, AFL or soccer, it's becoming more and more popular to still push and still maximize our windows of opportunity to make progress in the weights room, but at all times focusing on game day performance and never putting that at risk and putting too much fatigue in the system where we see a drop in performance. There's no point having all the PBs in the world on the bench press if you're bottom of the ladder, of course, and that's pretty common sense. But so we're all in it together to maximize the team's performance on the weekend and be in the best possible shape we can at the end of the year. So how do we break that up to be able to get the work in across the week without putting them at risk of fatigue on the weekend? Microdosing comes in play. So for example, if you're training, you might do a power session in the morning. So everything's focused on moving light and moderate weights as fast as possible. So you're working on your concentric power, things like jumps, medicine ball throws, and perhaps some Olympic lifting if you're competent in those. Then in the afternoon, after your football session, that's where you focus on your max strength. So things like box squats, maybe you do deadlifts, areas where we're trying to generate as much force as possible. Isometrics like the ankle, hip and knee that Alex Natira has made famous. So our running-based isometrics, generating high force, typically 3 to 5 second efforts with those. And then finishing with some accessory work where you're putting the body under a bit of fatigue and muscle dumps. Next on the list, we've got our speed development. So for those athletes that want to get faster on the field, what does that mean for their strength prescription? So if we want to get faster, typically strength, i.e. lifting as heavy as possible, and max velocity aren't as complementary as things like strength and power, for example. So if someone just wants to get more powerful, lifting heavy can assist that goal. Someone who wants to run faster, i.e. they want to go from 9 meters per second top speed to 9.5, I wouldn't be prioritizing how heavy they lift. I'd still be doing some high force activities like isometrics in running postures. So we're specifically in the position that you're going to be when you're sprinting and generating maximum force into the ground with a push isometric. But things like the box squat, the trap bar deadlift, during that phase, you go through a strength maintenance phase. So whatever your compound lift is. So you're not lifting those twice a week, for example. You're only lifting once a week, which would be typical in season. Moving over to common mistakes. So being too fixated on our barbell lifts, ultimately they're not powerlifters, they're not weightlifters. So we don't need to be doing Olympic lifting and heavy squats and deadlifts all year round. Be smart with our program when athletes had massive game outputs and you're lifting 2-3 days after the game. Some days they're going to be good, some days not. That's where the velocity based like gym aware is really handy, so they can auto-regulate. The athletes that are feeling good, they can get after it and they're well recovered. Other mistakes, too much plyometrics or speed work in season. We've got to recognize early in the week, athletes, it takes about 3 days to recover. We know from a lot of testing, 2-3 days to recover after a big game. So if you're doing max velocity efforts, hard accelerations and depth jumps, really advanced plyometrics, intensive plyometrics, bounds, the athlete's still recovering their coordination, their muscles, their central nervous system just isn't where it needs to be. So they're going to compensate with different movement patterns, load differently, and you're putting them at risk for some injuries. In terms of eccentrics, isometrics, and plyometrics, we want to think about knee extension. So for athletes that are lacking knee extension and perhaps their lower back limits them from a squat or deadlift point of view, that's where we can use machine-based work. And eccentrics are a great opportunity to super maximal load to get a bit of a stimulus on the quads. So for ACL guys, any knee-based injuries, or those that are just from a performance point of view, the acceleration's poor and they need to work on their hip and knee extension, loading up things like the leg press, 2 up, 1 down to hit the quads, hit the knees, seated calf work to target the soleus, so using the Smith machine on eccentrics. It's just with a lowering phase of the calf raise, single leg. See if we can get them to 1.5, 2 times body weight on the Smith machine. And then, of course, the common ones, the Nordics that I talked about. So adding some weight and profiling them using the NordBoard. So look at how much force they can generate with body weight on the NordBoard. Then add a 2.5 kilo at a 5 kilo, at a 7.5 kilo, at a 10, and just see where do they hit maximal eccentric force.